Hello, everyone. Good morning, and thank you so much for attending this discussion that we have titled Break My Sōl. More on that title here in a little bit, but I wanted to sort of frame this conversation by thinking back to the year of 2020. It's hard for me not to think about 2020 in this space specifically because it's the Sphinx conference that went down in February of 2020 that sort of opened the door, was our last normalcy before everything just went a little crazy. One of my biggest learnings, I think we all learned in the months that came after March, April, especially May. One of my biggest learnings was that in a sea of institutional equity statements, diversity initiatives, and promises for racial justice, those things don't in themselves manifest in the actual change that Black people are so tirelessly working for, not only in the arts, but across all of our ecosystems. Now, this isn't something to just complain about. We have to put action behind a recognition of that reality. And the way many of us have decided to engage these issues is through on-the-ground, grassroots arts activism. There are many of us in this line of work, many people who are really doing the work independently and through grassroots partnerships, and we represent 3 of those people who have come together since 2020 in our work with the Black Opera Alliance. My name is Garrett McQueen. For folks who don't know me, I am a bodhisattva of the earth, first and foremost. I'm a bassoonist as well, a radio and podcast producer, and I lead composer advancement initiatives for the American Composers Orchestra based in New York City.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jayme Alilaw, pronouns she, her, hers. I am an opera singer. I am also an executive leadership and life coach and leader trainer, and have now ventured into the realm of artist management. So I launched a management and live show production company called Good Soil Production and Management with my business partner, Angelique Dumas Edwards. Oh, and formerly of the Leadership Council for Black Opera Alliance.
Hi, I'm Derrell Acon. First and foremost, I am an activist. I use he, him pronouns. In addition to being one of the founders of Black Opera Alliance and the president of the board, I am also the vice president of People Operations and Inclusion at Opera Philadelphia.
So what is the Black Opera Alliance? More than we could tell you what the Black Opera Alliance is, we'd like to show you what the Black Opera Alliance is and some of the work that we've accomplished since 2020. But before we do that, I wanted us all to pay special attention to the quote that's on the screen there. It says, "To be a Black artist in the opera industry is to tread water in a sea of white." Jayme, can you speak more to what we mean by this sea of white?
So again, as an opera singer, I have found in my experience from education to emerging artists to working artists to arts administration that it's not just that, oh Lord, there's a lot of white people, right? Like it's not just that. It is the recognition that I am immersed in a culture that is established and steeped in whiteness. So outside of culture, just white supremacist ideologies and practices and structures and just ways of being and ways of doing. And so just to exist in that space and in that realm has been experienced as a continual compromise or navigation, just kind of figuring out how to get through.
Mm-hmm. Understanding that reality really is the framework for what we do. And through understanding that reality, we've had the incredible privilege, benefit of being able to accomplish just a few of the things, among the things we have accomplished, outlined here in this video.
The creation of a community for over 1,100 Black artists and administrators that make up the Black Opera Alliance. supported Black artists publicly and privately who have faced adversity from racist practices at work, uplifted BOA members in their personal accomplishments and projects, shared information with BOA members about employment and performance opportunities, released our first open letter contributing to the removal of David Tucker from the Richard Tucker Foundation, leading to our first feature in the New York Times, released the Pledge for Racial Equity and Systemic Change in Opera, a document contributed to by over 200 BOA members and signed by the majority of ABC-sized American opera companies. Creation of the Leadership Council model, a roundtable approach to leadership. Being granted nonprofit status as a 501c3 organization in 2021. Became 2021 Sphinx Venture Fund recipients, enabling BOA to fulfill our mission of fighting for equity in opera. Raised over $15,000 in the BOA GoFundMe Equity Push. Provided $750 in recording equipment to BOA members in 2021. Provided $1,250 in mini grants to BOA members for recording costs in 2022. Provided $570 in emergency grants and funds to BOA members in times of need. Offered employment opportunities for BOA members through jobs that supported equity in opera, including administration, community engagement, research, and social media. Launched a partnership with TRG Arts to track and report progress to racial equity in opera. Provided industry roundtable discussions such as the Equity Roundtable, Shade, a conversation about race, culture, and identity in opera, and the Dimensions of Demographic Research in collaboration with Opera America. Launched the blackoperaalliance.org website, created by a Black woman-owned business, Bliss Consults. Collaborated with Kappa for a public masterclass for BOA members with Gregory Lamar. Connected the BOA community with industry professionals for empowering panels like Strategizing for a Performance Career and the upcoming Preparing for the Performance. Created a financial education series for BOA members. Creation of BOA Equity Soldiers, BOA-S, creating pressure on companies who stand in the way of equity. Hosted BOA galas, showcasing and celebrating the talent of many underrepresented Black artists. Hosted the Black League of AGMA Artists for Change candidates ahead of the AGMA elections. Hosted monthly town halls and community conversations to inform, empower, and uplift BOA members. Inspired further change in the industry, evidenced by the launching of the Asian Opera Alliance. Collaborated with the Latina Women in Opera and Latinx Artist Society in Opera against audition fees. Provided nuance to countless industry panels and administrators on the themes of equity and Blackness in opera, and so much more. Here are just a few headlines of Black Opera Alliance in the news.
So we could talk for a long time about each of the things presented there and the many other things that aren't in this video, but Derrell, where much of our work, especially in the beginning stages, centered around was the pledge for racial equity. I wonder if you'll say a few things about the pledge and from your perspective, why that was an important place for us to start.
Yeah, I think it was important for several reasons. One reason it was important for us as a community, as BOA, was because the way in which it came together. When BOA first began, before it was even called BOA, and it was just a Facebook group, a lot of folks came together in the midst of the pandemic and decided that there were issues that were common for all of us as Black people trying to be opera performers, trying to be opera administrators, or in the classical world more largely. And what we did was say, what if we put together a list of demands of what we would like to see each opera company do to make their spaces more equitable, make their spaces better spaces of belonging for Black folks. And in order to do that, I would say literally, without exaggeration, thousands of Facebook messages and responses and editing and folks taking hold of the Google Doc and then getting tired of having hold of the Google Doc and someone else taking charge of the Google Doc until we had, the pledge, until we had these 8 points of these tenets of this is what we would like to see in your opera company. And then the second primary reason it became so important for the industry is because once we had that communally, centered document in hand, we sent it out to general directors, artistic directors, boards, and it became a way for us to begin to measure how folks were willing to come to the table with Black folks in opera, right? Because here you have something that thousands of Black folks have worked on, basically saying this is what we need, and we would like you to work with us to get it. And so how you respond to that prompt says a lot about your company and a lot about the work you are doing or that you need to be doing as it relates to equity in the industry.
Yep, and in conjunction with encouraging opera companies and our partners to sign the pledge, we also wanted to make sure that we were doing our homework, that we aren't speaking just from emotion or even only lived experience, but actual data that we were able to really present. So among our many partners over the course of our work, I'd like to especially highlight TRG Arts, who since 2020 has really helped us put together information that shows what these opera companies currently look like, what hiring practices look like and how those manifest. And through that partnership, there's some really stark data that we were able not only to find, but to present for many of our stakeholders. So that may be a little difficult for you to see, but what you'll see in the middle section there, that middle circle, that is representative of the racial demographics, the makeup of the city of Atlanta and the metro area, with the darkest blue part of that ring representing Black populations in the city of Atlanta. If you move up to that top ring, that is at that time at least, was the racial makeup of staff at Atlanta Opera. So as you can see, it's 100% white. This is a huge issue for us. For there to be a city like Atlanta to be so diverse, how can any institution, certainly even including an opera company, have demographics that look like that? With the help of TRG Arts, we were also able to really quantify the way that our partners and opera companies responded to the pledge. As it was mentioned, the majority of Opera America affiliated opera companies, 53%, really signed on and said, yes, we are willing to do this work. A large, some of them, about 37%, again, this data was collected in 2021, were in progress. They wanted to make sure things were legal, things aligned with their own equity statements, but unfortunately, there were some that left no response, and a small percent, 3%, who flat out said, no, we are not interested in what the Black Opera Alliance is doing, and we would rather move forward on our own. Jayme, I wonder what this aspect of the work looked like for you, not only partnering with companies like Washington National Opera, the Met, Opera Omaha, who were willing to really join with us, but the reality that there are opera companies that want nothing to do with grassroots activism.
Well, it was an interesting experience for me because one thing that I noted was that you couldn't predict a company's likelihood to sign on to the pledge by region or size. You know, like I imagine it would be easy to think like, oh, well, the bigger opera companies would probably have a harder time signing something like this because they've got to go through this, that, and the other. But, you know, some of our earliest signatories were the Met and Washington National Opera, along with many other smaller organizations. I'm trying to remember where it was, y'all excuse me, because I'm just out of the practice of code switching. It was, you know, that's what you see in the little bit of the delay. It was one of them states. It was one of them states where it was like, do they have black people? And they were like, let's sign, right? And the pledge only expressed that their staff and their boards and their stages mirror their community's population. So if you have 1.5% black people in the community, then that's the only request that the pledge had. And I'm trying to remember which company it was, but they were like, no, but like, can you help us? Because, you know, we ain't got none here, but we want to bring some, type of a thing. And so that was that was fascinating to me to see, disheartening in some ways, where you would hope, like Atlanta, where I reside, that there would be a more robust investment, because there's a lot of black folk there, you know. Also, as you mentioned, with many of the in-progress companies, there are many things to consider. And when we constructed the pledge and when we requested, when we petitioned the companies, we said, this is a strong template, but we want to work with you to word it accordingly, because each organization has different limitations and just different models. Some companies don't own the space that they're in, for example, so they don't dictate the practices of the facility, or they contract out the instrumentalists, for example. So there were many conversations with leaders of companies, and the first couple of meetings I went into, I noted that there was a tone that suggested, well, who are you? And why do we need to, why we need to talk to you? There was open enmity for some of them. Like, they was mad that they was spending 30 minutes on a call with these people who we don't even know who you are. And we were very intentional in the beginning in correspondence to sign everything Black Opera Alliance, no names. There was a good long stretch where you didn't know who you were talking to, which made a lot of people nervous, because one of those tenets of white supremacist culture is, I need to know the hierarchy so I can determine how much attention, respect, regard to give, and I need to see how you match up to me. And the way that we approached it is like, you talking to me because I'm Black, and I'm the expert on Black. So if you want to know what to do with and by Black people, you got to talk to Black people, and apparently you don't have any, so you talking to me, right? That was kind of the energy. And, you know, they came around.
Some of them.
Some, you know. But I mean, most came around, and if they didn't come around, they just knew who they was, you know. But it was an interesting exercise to be in the meetings and having these conversations, because we were in there. I mean, you know, 'cause Garrett ain't even, you know, opera. But we was in there because we are passionate about equity, and we know for certain that everyone within our organization, and so many of our colleagues even who were not in that organization, were well equipped, well prepared, well positioned to have opportunities that somehow still eluded them. And so it was an interesting exercise navigating this thing that is so personal. And I'll just throw my caveat in here. I think that we do have to speak from emotion because that's a part of the experience. And as human beings, I think that that's a lot of what the problem is. You know, I won't go on that soapbox. But to bring emotion and facts into the conversations. And there was a lot of adjustments on all sides.
Yep. And Derrell, one thing that's coming to mind for me is the word accountability. So not only, you know, were we and still are working to hold these opera companies accountable, we are also accountable to our community of over 1,000 people who, you know, have put their trust in us to really not only do this work, but keep them up to date about the work. One way that we decided to engage people's engagement with our pledge was through a green, yellow, red card status, and publicly posting these to the Black Opera Alliance social media so that we are being held accountable by not only our specific community, the Black Opera Alliance, but the industry as a whole. I wonder if you can speak a little bit to the green, yellow, red card status, and if you so choose, highlight how one of your former employers, I'll say, landed on that spectrum.
Yikes.
I missed that in the notes, but yeah. but I don't mind. I don't mind. So I mean, the red, green, yellow status is pretty straightforward. You know, red basically means that either one has refused to sign the pledge, or there have been repeated attempts to come to the table to have a conversation about it, or constant runaround to the degree that we feel that there is not an actual future for that company becoming a signatory. Yellow status means in progress, and what this usually means is that it's a company with which we've had contact, and they say, you know, we're checking with our legal team, or we want to make sure we have some mechanisms by which our staff is able to have input. You know, those are all reasonable requests, and so those folks are in the yellow category, and then the green category, of course, are those folks who have already signed our pledge either as is, or I will say a majority of the companies have signed versions of our pledge where they've actually worded it themselves to just better fit the vibe of their company. And you know, as the status reporting progressed, what we were noticing is that there were some companies that had actions in the industry that rose to the level of deserving a red card status, almost regardless of their how they were interacting with the pledge, right? And one such company was the company I used to work for in Long Beach Opera, and this was a moment several months ago now, over a year ago now, which is wild, where all of the Black people at the company left at the same time, and we sent we sent a collective resignation letter saying when we would leave, why we were leaving, and said what we would like to see happen in the time that remained of our stay, right? You know, because we weren't leaving right away. You know, we still felt like there was work we could do. And the way that the company responded to that was very much in the spirit of what Jayme was getting at, that this recurring element of white supremacist culture of who are you? And how, you know, who are you to tell me what to do, or who are you to feel like you have that kind of power, right? And sometimes, as Garrett began the presentation, sometimes you just have to show people, right? Because I may not have the industry pool that you do, but I have a voice, right? And I have a mind, and I have a community, right? And so leaving all at once was a statement. And of course, they didn't respond in a way that was productive. And so once we were out of the company, they also became a red card company. And it gave us an opportunity as a starting place to discuss the ways in which their actions were violent and unsafe. not only for Black folks, but for the industry at large.
And not only over the course of this work have challenges come externally, but there have been internal challenges. You know, one of the difficult conversations that I think exist out there that we're becoming more and more comfortable with is really acknowledging this idea of the talented 10th, or the initiative of platforming a few Black people who aligned with white supremacist ideals to gaslight and to invalidate those of us who really are in this work and really are centering equity for Black people. And one of our members had the great courage to speak to this issue directly, and we're going to listen to a little bit of what he had to say on the topic.
He presents himself as a mentor and an advocate for young Black opera singers, and was looked up to by me and a lot of my colleagues because of the way we would see him advocate, until we tried to advocate for ourselves. When young Black opera singers started calling out the opera industry for their lack of diversity, he took the opportunity to essentially tell them that it's because they're not putting in the work. Get good enough to get noticed and you won't be so angry. Then you can make a difference. Apparently, some of us that were the most vocal about this equality thing had the least amount of experience or preparation. I'm not sure why that matters, but after we displace him, then we can have a real voice. And he keeps suggesting that we send him proof that we can in fact sing well because he sits on several boards. But the insinuation that there's not enough qualified Black people is actually kind of dangerous and untrue. So I started calling him out on it. He doesn't like that. It actually became a recurring theme, my calling out his problematic behavior. And he's kind of a bully and sends in my DMs with this mess. You'll probably need a screenshot to get it all. Wait, not yet. Okay, now. Yeah, there's more. Ready? Jokes aside, I didn't exactly need this while I was working. You can't talk to people like this, especially not if you're gonna be calling yourself a mentor or sitting on boards with hiring power. I think I speak for a lot of us when I say that we are sick and tired of losing respect for our elders.
Sick and tired of losing respect for our elders. So if you don't know who this artist is, his name is Babatunde Akinboboye, very impactful figure in the arts. Jayme, this is your artist. You manage Babatunde. I wonder if you can speak to the decision to put something out like this and I actually edited this video a little bit to protect the person in question. But Jayme, I wonder if you can speak to why sometimes we shouldn't take that approach, again, through the context of being accountable to our community.
Certainly, because it speaks to a challenge that we've experienced as an organization. One of the conversations we've been having internally is around what marks activism, and with the recognition, the acknowledgement that it takes many different forms. What we found, though, within that is that some wanted to stretch it to mean that activism was my Black self get in the bag, and that was the extent of it, you know, kind of by any means necessary type of a rhetoric. And so that has been an internal conflict, you know, what does count as activism? And as an organization, we have been met with critique around our tactics with the red, yellow, green card, the conversations that we've taken publicly. And it's very disruptive, which when we look at the state of the opera industry, it needs to be disrupted, is the premise of the foundation of the organization. Babatunde is my first artist that we managed, and also one of the original members of Black Opera Alliance. So he's always had this heart for empowering Black people to show up in opera as we are. And his platform has blown up because of it, because he is showing up as he is, combining opera and hip hop, because that's the way he hears opera in his head, is he filters it through the lens of hip hop. And to speak about things that everybody knows, everybody sees, but nobody's saying, so nothing's changing. He's saying stuff, and because his following consists of a spectrum of people who don't know anything about opera except for what he teaches them, to those people who are legends in the opera industry, who love his innovation and his boldness, it's noticed. And he's not supposed to have that much power, according to white supremacist notions. He didn't work his way up. He has not sung at the Met. He, has not sung at La Scala. So he is not supposed to influence discourse, which is a belief that not only white people, but Black people have approached him with, mostly Black people, honestly, which we have to bring into the conversation, because white supremacy is not about white skin. And so it's essential to have these conversations, because how will we know if we don't? And this video came, he had people in his DMs like, man, you need to take that down. You shouldn't be like putting the stuff out there like that. As his manager, I'm privy to what went into it. And this man was minding his Black business on a gig with Detroit Opera, actually, preparing his largest role to date with his largest contract to date. What we're aspiring for Black people in opera. The person in his DMs, Morris Robinson, presents and advocates for such things and has been that for some young Black artists. But it was disheartening, and it pissed me off, I'm gonna say it like that, that Tunde is doing his thing on this opera and is met with DMs mocking him because somehow he found out that there was some struggles, which, imagine that, is struggle with this French opera with a gang of French dialogue nobody has ever done or heard before. And there are some issues, which to me, again, this is what we're advocating for, especially for young artists, young Black artists. Let them learn on the job too. Because I don't know about y'all. Uh-oh, am I getting too heated? Because I could be loud. I don't know about y'all, but I have certainly been on gigs where my white colleagues have been afforded much grace. So the fact that Detroit Opera extended that grace to Tunde, because they know that he was the best for it, and I don't know if y'all saw it, but he tore it up. But he had to do that, filtering from under the vitriol coming from this man that he once saw as a mentor. And it's because he's had the nerve to speak out about practices such as darkening the skin, AKA blackface, with your girl Anna Netrebko, who loves it. I mean, she can't get enough. And he says something, and then there are others, Black people, who show up to cape for her in the comments. That's fine if that's your belief. But the point is that he speaks out about what he is seeing, personal and colleagues, that has been destructive to the industry. He's speaking out on behalf of young artists and students who were actively told that they don't have a voice because they 5 arias probably ain't even good yet. But I can't say anything about the fact that I have to pay $100 to apply for a job and y'all might not listen to my recording. I can't say something if I get into a young artist program and they're paying me $100 a week to sing chorus, secondary roles, covers, student shows. But I can't say anything until I have achieved, according to white supremacist measures, success. Then I can say something, but you don't want to, because you might mess up the bag. The point is this whole thing needs to be disrupted. So that's why we have to say names. That's why we have to speak when it comes out. It's not about shame. It's not about condemnation. It is about identifying the core issues and how they impact. I have to talk him up every time somebody comes to him with an opera offer, because he ain't got to do it. Not with the platform he's created. So the opera industry created this fissure for him because y'all don't know how to act. You know what I mean? Like, people don't want to be there. So I think we better start talking about it, or else you're just going to see people disappearing, and then you're going to be like, what happened?
Jayme, you're certainly getting heated, you know.
I know I done took up all the time too, my bad.
Which was a, I'm actually highlighting that word because it was one of the tracks on Beyonce's Renaissance, as was, as was the tune Break My Soul, which is how, you know, we came up with the title of this panel. I do want to open up the floor to any questions or comments, but as we do that, Derrell, I wonder if you can speak to your continued engagement of the opera industry. This work has not broken your soul. You're still moving forward. So how are you moving forward, especially considering the front-facing work of BOA? People know who you are. People know who you have been affiliated with. People know what you have done. I think there's often a fear that if you speak out or you move forward, you have no way of engaging, you know, the industry moving forward. But from my perspective, you single-handedly proved that wrong.
Well, first of all, I appreciate that. What I think is important about my career is that I've always been unapologetic about the fact that I'm an activist. This job I have now, this executive role at Opera Philadelphia, I love it. I have a fantastic team, a fantastic CEO. But if you go back, and you can literally do this on Google now, if you go back and look at the press release announcing my getting this position, you will see, you know, Dr. Derrell Acon, activist, blah, 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 blah. You know, and so this was something that sits at the center of everything I do, right? And what I decided was that if I am full-throated about what I'm hoping to do in the industry, who I'm hoping to be in the industry, then eventually there will be spaces that will meet me where I am, right? And once those spaces present themselves, then I will just step right through the door. And it just so happens that Opera Philadelphia, you know, prior to my having this job, I had the opportunity to have many touch points with my now supervisor, David Devan, who's the CEO and president of Op Philadelphia, through our work together, working for at the New Works Forum at Opera America. And I was the arts equity specialist for that, and he was one of the committee members. And I saw how full-throated he was about, he would often say, I feel like there are too many white people talking on this subject, and we just don't have enough of our BIPOC colleagues in the room. We should stop this meeting. I see this man, this white guy in his 60s saying these things. And so once the position opened up, I had that opportunity, I had that history with him, and I knew that if he were leading this company, I'm sure the company wouldn't be perfect, but at least it would be somewhere where a voice like mine would have some platform, right? And I would say prior to now, as I just spoke about the Long Beach Opera, that was good for a while, but when I became too heated, I guess, then it was there was a sense of people wanting to put me in my place, right? And I think for anybody who knows me personally, that's never going to happen, right? And I think, and so I think that's part of it as well, just fortitude, and I hope to have a bit of intelligence that affords me the opportunity to navigate spaces with an ability to always hold true to my values, and I think when we're in an industry that is so fragile when it comes to values, there's so few of them. when you show up with a full deck, you're already bringing in a lot of power, a lot of presence, and so that's worked to my advantage.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions or any from Hop-In, or we can start with you? Yes, please.
Brilliant, thank you so much. My name is Dorian Block. I'm the social media manager for the Dallas Opera, and it is inspiring to see how social media had such a pivotal role in creating the Black Opera Alliance. Do you have any advice for organizations that are inspired, or people that are coming together inspired by that movement, to create a body like Black Opera Alliance that's also seen success in Asian Opera Alliance? I'm a part of the Transgender Opera Alliance, and we're looking to you as leaders for how to make that a movement that is successful like you've seen success.
Well, I mean, the first thing I will say is that, and the Asian Opera Alliance affirms this on their website, that the inspiration of that group was the Black Opera Alliance. So the impact that we have had, at this point, has even inspired other demographic and racial groups to, put on those activist shoes, put on that activist hat, and move forward. For me, the prime ingredient is courage. If the courage is not there, if an attachment to institutional proximity, is what a person feels like they have to prioritize, this is not the work for you. That's what I would say on that. Jayme?
I will add to that, community is essential. The thing that brought so many of us to this organization was our passion for ourselves and each other, and our belief in what we have to bring. And we all had our different approach to that, but I think if you're rooted in that core attribute of community, that's the thing that will buoy your courage. Because, and this is something we shared with the members all the time, if there's something going on, you're not dealing with Long Beach by yourself. You have a whole community, you have a crew that will validate your experience, because that's one of the, we know white supremacist culture is one of the biggest gaslighters, right? Like, you checking stuff like, dang, maybe I'm crazy. So you've got a community that will validate you not crazy, and depending upon the organization and the way y'all move, you got a crew to back you up. It's my personal preference to have people who will mobilize on my behalf. So that's something that I beseech other organizations, that you be in community with each other and that you show up for each other in community in a way that is not deniable.
I want to honor the people who are attending virtually. Are there any, is there a question from Hop In? Sure, thank you.
Yes. This comes from Brad Powell. How do we define success for the sake of this panel? And if there is any success that the panelists can point to, can we receive a link to supporting data?
We can't understand.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
From Brad Powell, how do we define success for the sake of this panel? If there is any success any panelists can point to, can we receive a link to supporting data?
Success in our work.
Yeah, and how we define that. I mean,
Oh,
Derrell, how do you define
Oh,
success
sure.
for-
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm not the best person to answer that question. I feel successful, you know, because I feel like if you are true to what you've set out to do, you're always successful, right? If you've set values for yourself and you are constantly creating spaces for those values to be upheld, then that's success, right? And so for BOA, you know, there's this saying that often it goes in the Black church, if I could just save one soul, you know. And so in the context of BOA, if there's one Black person who is positively affected by the work we're doing, then we're successful, right? And there are hundreds, if not thousands, not only in this country but around the world, that have been impacted by the work we have done. And I would argue that maybe there will be even more impact because of the fires that we have both put out and started, who down the line will be positively or at least productively impacted as a result. And so that's how I look at success. I think success as sort of this vacuum, the idea that these are the metrics of success, and if you don't get there, then we need to come back to the table and discuss what we do going forward. You know, that's something that is appropriate in certain contexts, but when it comes to activism, you have to understand that sometimes the walls are so high that you're not going to get every single demand that you've laid out. You're not going to get every single positive response from the community, but you're going to keep fighting and get as much as you can within your lifetime. So that's my version of success.
Yes, please.
Well, and I just want to add it. Just come on up. But in terms of success for BOA, I think that if we look outside, I would point to the impact. We've had many general directors and leaders who have thanked us for our pledge and our outspokenness, because it has given them leverage to make moves and to implement initiatives that they couldn't justify before with their boards. But because there was a call for it, and the call was loud and tenacious, they had support that they didn't have before. I see success as the fact that we have empowered Black people to move forward in their careers in the way they've wanted. There have been a whole lot of administrative positions created, I'ma just say. And also identify our power and decision-making choices, and knowing that we can craft our careers in the way that is most uplifting and empowering for ourselves, rather than being subjected to the requisite path that's been laid out.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jenny Clotter, Director of Communications at Lincoln Center and former opera singer, and longtime fan of you guys. Been following you guys on Instagram for several years, and first of all, just want to applaud the incredible work you've done in such a short amount of time. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to how BOA squares their work with a canon that, you know, there's some operas where racial stereotypes are like plot point. They're like built in. And so what work is BOA doing to maybe educate around that or expand the canon?
So what I'll say first is that when I was invited to become a leadership council member of the Black Opera Alliance, that is one of the main questions that I asked myself. I channel my Issa Rae all the time. I'm rooting for everybody black, right? So if there are people, and I think we have varying opinions on that point specifically.
Who's cheering for everybody black?
Right, exactly. But for me, if there are black people who want to sing Rossini, if there are black people who want to sing Porgy, if there are black people who want to, do this thing, I feel a responsibility to be in support of them. With that being said, I do think that the opera industry needs to explore what it looks like to prioritize new music and new opera. I'm sure that many of you read, I forget if it was the New York Times or something, the Met Opera has dipped into their endowment $30 million worth because they see the positive impact of new works. The first time I stepped foot in that building was for Fire Shut Up in My Bones. I can't wait to see Champion in April. I really can't wait to see Malcolm X next season. And that's not even a new opera, but I think for me, the advocacy piece has always, especially lately, centered black opera singers. But as we move forward, advocacy for new works, especially works by black composers, is going to be vital.
The only thing I would add to that is that there are certainly issues with the canon, but if we were to write a list of top 100 issues that black folks have in an inequitable industry, the canon would be far down that list. I would offer, in systemic items of this industry that are pressing black people daily, and so to Garrett's first point, our charge has always been to create a space where black people have the agency to decide how they want to interact with those titles, right? I in addition to this work, I also am a scholar of 19th century opera, so I've been on many panels where I am critiquing the vibes of a Monostatos or whatever it may be, but the mission of Black Opera Alliance has to do with breaking down, dismantling barriers for black artists and administrators in the industry right now, and I think we still have a lot more steps to go before we start to prioritize the repertoire.
I just got the 5-minute warning, so I want to make sure we get as many of the questions as we can. Thank you for that question. Please.
Hello, I'll try to read this quick. Next is here, he, they pronouns, consultant, performer, former voice soprano. Really grateful for the work you've done across communities, especially as someone who's black and Filipino American. My question has to do regarding your statement about the Emmett Till opera, especially how nuanced it was, but there were clearly some people engaging with it who were showing up to the conversation for the first time. And while I believe that advocacy does include educating, if you spend all your time educating, you have no time to do the work. So my question, and this might be a false dichotomy, how do you find that sweet spot between talking about the work and doing the work, knowing that some people just get there when they get there?
Concerning our public and NPR published critiques of the Emmett Till opera, I'll just quickly say that as an industry, we have to learn how to celebrate black people outside of black trauma, and that's just that. But as far as, the engagement of people who are getting there and working with them, my advocacy is highlighting the fact that there are many people who are there. So let's center them. Let's make them the executive directors of these opera companies. Let's do the things to actually move the industry forward in that way. I'm not necessarily advocating, for anyone to clear house and rehire and do all of that sort of thing. But I think when we center the people who are trying to get there, we forget about the people who are there and haven't been given the opportunity.
I say child because there's so much to be done, and we often stretch ourselves trying to tend to all of it. And so you as an individual and you as your organization have to identify what your passion is. That can be challenging in a sea of so many problems, because then we can get pulled away, you responding to and reacting to the problems. But when you identify, this is who I am, this is what drives me, this is where I'm oriented, this is who I'm talking to, then the other stuff, you know, they can figure that out. But you won't break my soul. You're not finna wear me out today. Cause it will. And it becomes a distraction tactic even. You know, feigning ignorance. And I've gotten to the point where it's like, whether you ignorant for real or for fake, that's not my ministry. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jose Martinez. I'm a freelance musician, teaching artist, administrator, and from a very young age I told myself, you know, the reason why I'm struggling to make it to the classical music, I will take on this struggle for the next generation so the next generation doesn't. And so my career has two facets in educating and cultivating the next generation of artists, artists that look like me and come from the places I do. And then the next part is ensuring and promising that those young artists have a place in the creative economy. And so I do my work in teaching and community engagement, trying to lift up and encourage the next generation. But I was just curious on what any ideas or what you are doing to bring the youth along and ensure that this what your future, your goals, your vision might entitle how that's going to affect them.
Yeah, the Black Opera Alliance has an entire education wing led by members of our constituency who really have those skills and have that passion. I'm not a part of that team. I don't know if either of you can speak to, briefly, because we have 1 minute, briefly speak to the education aspects of our work.
What I have found is, one, affirming within the youth that their talent, that their gift is theirs. It does not belong to the industry where they seek to find advancement, because if they find that that industry does not reciprocate, they need to be ready to pick up their instrument and go. Mm-hmm. Because so many times we leave our instrument because we say, oh, it didn't work, so that means that there's something wrong with, no. It's them, baby. You go on ahead and go over here. So empowering them in that sense, and also empowering them to be fully them in showing up. Bring your culture, bring your perspective, bring your ideas, bring your innovation, bring your approach, bring you into the space. Because to the point of the previous question, when you spend time building and affirming what you want, a lot of those undesirable elements don't have space to grow or breathe, and they die off. So if we are funding and creating new works, then people are not going to be clamoring for the rapey operas anymore.
Final question. I know we're out of time, but final question. Thank you.
Hi. So my name is Kevin Day, and I'm a composer and professor near the Toronto, Canada area, and it's been really great to be here to be part of this. My question is, I have been commissioned to write an opera for a company here in the US, and my librettist and I are actively trying to write something that is more so about Black joy as opposed to Black trauma. What is your advice to first-time opera collaborators as we try to make this happen?
Well, first of all, let me say I love your trumpet concerto. I've aired it on the radio a lot. It's great to meet you.
The trumpet concerto.
But I would say that when we're identifying black joy, we have to identify areas where black joy exists. So, we've been talking about the factotum, that's running around out there. We can talk about operas that are set in black church, or the cookout. We always talk about the cookout, right? What would it look like to have an opera where the setting is a cookout? So, my advice would be to help stakeholders identify places where black joy exists currently. And for the record, largely that is not the opera house. So we have to look outside of those spaces to make sure that, the seeking that black joy and portraying it artistically is done in a genuine way. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you all so much. Thank you, both of you.